You might think that all serial killers are people with low intelligence that don't know the difference between right and wrong. But the terrifying reality is quite the opposite. Join us today as we list down the smartest serial killers in history. Most of us know who the fictional evil genius Hannibal Lecter is. But have you ever wondered if any real-life serial killers are as intelligent as Anthony Hopkins' iconic character? Well, the truth is most of us are not. While the average serial killer's IQ is 94.7 in the average range, there are some who do possess higher intelligence. The most common definition of serial killer is someone who kills at least 3 people over a period of time. Over the years, the definition has changed to be at least 2 killings. If you have the IQ of a genius, that doesn't mean you won't be a criminal. The people on this list know that all too well, as they use their powerful minds for something other than academic success, namely cold-blooded murder. By the Stanford Binet intelligence scale, an IQ of 130 to 144 is considered gifted, and only 2.3% of test takers have hit such a score. Less than 1% hit an IQ score of 145 to 160, which is at a genius level and close to the same mental performance as Stephen Hawking and Albert Einstein. The following murderers were all cunning and manipulative. They trapped their victims both mentally and physically, leaving a trail of bloody clues for the police to piece together. Was it their high intellect that turned such dark urges into a hobby, or were they so smart that they thought they'd get away with it? Either way, a lot of innocent lives were lost at the hands of these monsters. Before we continue, a brief request from us. If you find value in this video, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss our valuable content on psychology in the future. Now off to the list of the smartest serial killers in history. Number 1. John Christie with an IQ of 128. In the 1940s and early 1950s, John Christie, also known as the Whispering Killer of England, murdered at least 8 people, including his own wife. His crimes were only revealed after he left his apartment and the bodies of his victims were discovered hidden in a wall. His wife's body was discovered beneath the floor of their living room, and 2 more were discovered in the back garden. Despite the fact that police suspected Christie of murder, errors in the investigation allowed Christie to get away with his crimes for years until the bodies were discovered. In 1953, he was hanged for the murder of his wife. Number 2. Ted Bundy with an IQ of 136. Ted Bundy confessed to murdering 30 women between 1974 and 1978, but the true number of victims is unknown. Bundy was notorious for mutilating the bodies of his victims and performing sexual acts on their remains. He was eventually placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, though he managed to break out of jail more than once. Bundy was eventually apprehended, tried for his crimes, and executed via electric chair on January 24, 1989 in Stark, Florida. Number 3. Lawrence Bittaker with an IQ of 138. One of the toolbox killers, Lawrence Bittaker, kidnapped, raped, tortured, and murdered 5 teenage girls. Even before the murders, he had run into trouble with the law, and while in state prison, he was found to be paranoid and borderline psychotic. Despite this, he somehow managed to get released. When Bittaker met Roy Norris, they began murdering together. They bought a van, which they nicknamed the Murder Mac. They committed a number of atrocities in their killing spree, and they were only found out when Norris was picked up on minor drug offenses. John Douglas, the FBI agent on the case, described Bittaker as the most quote-unquote disturbing person he'd ever profiled. Number 4. Stephen Christopher Stanko with an IQ of 143. Stephen Stanko, who had a grandiose sense of self-importance, failure to conform to social norms, and a lack of remorse, had already served a prison sentence for kidnapping and published a book about prisons while he was locked up. Stanko began doing some research on serial killers after his release, and articles about famous killers were discovered in his home. Stanko murdered his girlfriend as well as a fellow library patron. He also sexually assaulted his girlfriend's daughter, who managed to flee and contact the police. This led to Stanko's arrest in 2005. He is currently on death row in South Carolina. Number 4. Jeffrey Dahmer with an IQ of 144. Between 1978 and 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer murdered 17 men and boys. He'd pick them up at gay bars and drive them home before drugging and strangling them. He would dismember them after performing sex acts on their lifeless bodies, taking photos for posterity along the way. He also kept body parts in his freezer, practiced cannibalism, and had lobotomies performed on him. Dahmer was apprehended after police discovered Tracy Edwards, a man wandering around with his wrists in handcuffs who claimed Dahmer had drugged him. Dahmer was quickly apprehended and later murdered in prison by a fellow inmate. Number 6. Edmund Kemper, with an IQ of 145. Edmund Kemper was dubbed a natural-born killer by investigators, and for good reason. Kemper was formidable, 6'9" feet tall, weighed over 300 pounds, and had an IQ of 145. His victims included his grandparents, several women, and even his own mother. Authorities believe Kemper murdered 10 people in total, and he reportedly kept some of his victims' heads for days before disposing of them. Kemper eluded law enforcement for 9 years before turning himself in and requesting the death penalty. Instead, Kemper was given 8 life sentences. Number 7. Andrew Cunanan, with an IQ of 147. Andrew is best known for murdering fashion designer Gianni Versace, but he also has 4 other victims. He was a bright student who spoke 7 languages, but he got into trouble in school when he began pathologically lying. Cunanan reportedly had an obsession with violent sex from a young age and even had sex for money as a teenager. Despite the fact that he committed numerous murders, beginning with his former lover Jeff Trail, the FBI was unable to apprehend him. Versace is thought to be Cunanan's final victim. Cunanan committed suicide 8 days later after murdering his victim, never revealing why he murdered the designer in the first place. Number 8. Charlene Gallego, with an IQ of 160. Gallego committed numerous murders with her husband, Gerald Gallego, during the late 1970s. A violin prodigy with an IQ of 160, some believe Charlene was the mastermind behind the couple's killings. They kidnapped 10 people, some as young as 13 and most of them female, whom they sexually assaulted and held captive before eventually murdering them. Charlene later agreed to testify against her husband and as a result received only a 17-year prison sentence. She was released in 1997. Number 9. Ted Kaczynski, with an IQ of 167. Kaczynski, also known as the Unabomber, was a math prodigy with an IQ of 167. Kaczynski was accepted to Harvard at the age of 16, but he reportedly disliked modern technology. To protest, he mailed bombs mostly to professors between 1978 and 1995, killing 3 people and injuring 23 others. Kaczynski would leave messages that were encrypted with mathematical codes that even the FBI couldn't decipher. He evaded capture for 17 years, but when his manifesto was released, his brother and sister-in-law recognized the writing style and alerted the FBI. Lastly, number 10, Rodney Alcala, with an IQ of 170. Rodney, also known as the dating game serial killer, was estimated to have an IQ of 170. Alcala was also well known for being the winner of a 1978 episode of the dating game. This occurred while he was killing women in California. Although investigators discovered over 1,000 photos Alcala took of his crimes and estimated he had 50 victims after his trial, he was only found guilty for killing 5 people. Rodney managed to get off on a technicality on his first murder trial, but he was later convicted in 2005 due to DNA evidence. Rodney died in prison from natural causes in 2021. This is where we conclude today's video on the smartest serial killers in history. Also be reminded that this video is primarily for information only and we do not claim to provide professional insight in the field of psychology. If you've got the time, please leave a like, subscribe, and click that bell button to receive information on our new videos. Anyway, see you later and thank you for watching.